Today's webinar, we're going to be covering equipment costs, and there's always tends to be a lot of questions for this topic. And so Scott's going to review the equipment asset accounts, go over the difference between ownership and operating costs. Um, Hope there's time to cover overhead allocation, how you do that, and why you would do overhead and traction. And when we start doing the allocations of cost repairs to equipment, really understanding deep dive in how that impacts the field profitability reports. We had a webinar a couple of weeks ago that focused on field profitability. We didn't really have a whole lot of time to focus on equipment costs on the field profitability reports. This webinar will definitely touch on that and go much further into that. And this is just a high level, I guess, layout of the features. There's three different tiers, Basic, Plus, and Pro. I know there's quite a few people today that have a combination of these. Today, really the things that we're covering today are going to fall under Plus and Pro, and Scott's going to explain where these features lie with each of Plus and Pro. So Scott, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, before I actually get into traction, parts of what I'm going to do will only be available in the Pro level, and parts are going to be in Plus and Pro. So kind of like to outline those real quick, and as we get into it, I'll try and remember to call them out again. But if you're on Traction Plus, you will be able to add equipment and set up default cost, a manual cost. You'll be able to allocate cost to equipment. And then when it comes to showing your costing on your field profit centers, that's all going to be based on default costing. The pro level is going to let you assign it to entities and to accounts, and those will get, I'll kind of show you as we do it, that's what gets used for the market value balance sheet in pro. You can also add ownership costs to it. You can do the operating cost just like Plus, but the big difference is that you've got an option to show actual cost on your field profit centers. The other part is that Traction Pro will allow you to have equipment that's not used in field records. I'll kind of show you how to do that and how to do overhead. So I will jump into the program, and what I'm going to do is take you through adding some equipment and putting some cost on it and using it in field records and kind of show how that cost will flow through to the fields. So all of your equipment is managed in the resources area down below. If I click on resources and go to equipment, and I've got a bunch of equipment set up here, I'm just going to go ahead and add a new piece of equipment from scratch. And we're going to start by adding a combine in here. So my combine, I'm just going to call it my 2025 combine. So that name is what's going to show up for my profit centers, my equipment list. That name will also show up on the listing and the market value balance sheet if I'm using that. We've got the option down below as to whether this equipment's used in field records or not. So combine, I want to use it in my field records. I'm going to tell it then whether I want to track it by the acre or the field, or the acre or the hour, sorry. So this acre hour setting's pretty important. Your field records, every time that equipment gets used on the field, is going to track the hours or the acres used on that field, and that's how it's going to spread its cost around there. So if it's acres, it's real simple. The more acres it goes over, the more higher percent of the cost. Hours is probably more accurate for tracking hours. If you really know hours on it, that probably gets you a little better representation for doing it. One thing I kind of see from experience, a lot of people want to track hours, but quickly kind of lose track of it and struggle to get the accurate information. So kind of up to you, whichever you want to go. The easy button's acres. If you got hours, want to track it hours. We're going to ask you for a default cost. So default cost is kind of what your expected cost per acre per hour is. I mean, I'll see a lot of time people use university numbers. Maybe Purdue, a different university, tells you the typical operating cost for equipment could be in there. Could be a custom rate. I'm not sure that's as good, but if nothing else, use a custom rate. I'll kind of show you where this will get used as we start doing some analysis with it. So I'm just going to put a value in there of $10 an acre. Now, when you add equipment into the program here, what I would say is you want to add any piece of equipment that you want to track cost on. So anything that I want to keep track of the repairs cost to, any management cost to, any other costs that I've got for that equipment, I want to add it in here. So any equipment that you only want on your market value balance sheet, there's no reason to add it here. The market value balance sheet will let you add other pieces of equipment that aren't here. So these are equipment that I want to manage, kind of keep track of information on. Then I've got the option as to whether this equipment is owned or not. So if this was a leased piece of equipment, I would just leave that turned off. That would allow me to allocate my rent cost, many other costs that I have to it. In my case, I'm just going to go ahead and say this is a tractor that I own. When I say owned, now I've got a few questions I can answer. So the first thing, these first two questions are going to be used for my market value balance sheet. So I can say, okay, that is owned by the Traction Farms entity. On my balance sheet, I want it to go to this harvest equipment account. Rest of the information is more for reference purposes and for some other things. So here I can put in the date that I purchased it. And that date, I mean, the rest of this information, this isn't going to actually add things to your book. So when I put purchase cost to it, it's not going to actually go out and do debits and credits or anything. This purchase cost is mostly for my reference purposes. So if I happen to know the exact cost, go ahead, type it in. If I don't know the exact cost, but I got a rough idea, an estimate here will work pretty well for me. So what it's going to do is take me through and ask me just a few things. How long do I expect to keep that piece of equipment? So maybe if I expect to keep it for, we'll say 10 years, I'll put 10 in there. The next question is just going to ask us how much the residual value, what do I expect it's going to be worth at the end of those 10 years? So I'm just going to plug in 100,000 there. So what we'll do is the program's going to come up with an ownership cost. This is basically saying if I take the cost I paid for it and spread it over those 10 years, this is what it will work out to be. So I can type in based off the values I typed in. I can just click that calculator button. In my case, it calculated $15,000. Now, for some reason, you don't like that number, you've got a number you really want to use there, you can change this number, make it whatever you want on it. We're just calculating it to give you a starting point. So what we're going to do is take, as we spread the actual cost of this equipment over the fields where it's worked, we're going to take the ownership cost plus any other costs like repairs, and that's going to be the cost that spreads across the fields. So once I've got it all there, I'll just hit the save button. And now that equipment is, if I scroll my list right, there's that equipment there. So I had a second piece of equipment. Let's say that I've got some grain trucks. And these trucks, I kind of want to keep track of the cost on it. So I want to keep track of the maintenance cost on it and things like that, but they're never going to be used in farming records. And those costs, I would kind of like to have those costs showing up on my fields. So I'm just going to set up a new grain truck here. Maybe this is, we'll call it 25 grain. So when I get down below, I don't want to use it in field records. I'm going to turn that check mark off. So when I turn that check mark off, that's going to make it so that equipment doesn't show up when I go to my equipment list for field records. And down below, it's going to give me a way to allocate these costs to fields. So basically, if I leave this selected, even split by field area, it's going to take all the cost and it's just going to spread those costs across all the fields based on the area of each field for the year. So we do give you another option in here. You can do a weighted split by crop. So weighted split by crop, this might be nice if maybe I only use that truck for corn or I only use it for beans. I can split the two. If I want to get, this is really up to you how picky you want to get. I mean, it's probably going to haul more corn than beans. So I could say maybe roughly, I think it'll be 60% corn and 40% beans. So that's just going to take the cost It's going to spread it between the cornfields and the bean fields, with the cornfields getting more than the bean fields on it. So just different ways to do the allocations in there. Once again, if this is a piece of equipment I own, I can go in and say, okay, that's going to go to my trucks. I can put in the cost on it and calculate that ownership cost. So kind of pause for a second and ask any questions on what I've done so far. And I'm not seeing any, so.
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. But yeah, so far, Scott, I have not seen any questions in the chat.
Very good. So next step I'm going to do is just kind of show what happens. So that's a brand new combine. Let's say I'm just going to put in a field record right now and put that combine in the field record. So I start having it being used on some fields. So I will go to field records and I'm just going to add a new field record and I'm going to do a harvest record. And this is just for kind of testing purposes. I'm going to do a 26 harvest. And I'm just going to do a whole bunch of crops at once. So I'm just going to take and do a harvest for all these fields. So this case, I'm going to take that combine, I'm going to have it go across multiple fields here. So I will just go ahead and say next. I'll just leave it today's date in there. And the yield part, this really isn't important for what we're doing today, but I'm going to go ahead and plug a yield in here. Actually, I don't want to do that much. Just going to go forward. But the important part for what we're doing today, I'm going to pick out that 2025 combine. It's a piece of equipment that was used, and it's got 1,019 acres. That's the total acres for all those fields on this. And say yes. What I've done now is just created all of those harvest records. So I'm just going to kind of jump ahead, show you what we have on a report. So I've got one field that doesn't have a lot of field records on it. So this field, I go to Field Profit Center, go to Field Details. I'm going to pick, I've got a field set up. So the only thing this field has had done to it has been that harvest record. So I'm going to go to this home number 217 and just kind of show you as a starting point. So this field right now has had, this has been planted. I've got a planting record on it. I've got a harvest record on it. I now have a grain truck with a cost on it, and the combine is a cost on it. So what we'll see that cost right now, if I go look at that cost, where that cost is coming from, if I take that combine for 2026 and look at it, that cost is coming from, my cost there is $15,000. That is my ownership cost. It's being spread over those 1,000-some acres right now, so it's costing me $14.71 an acre. So it's taking that total cost there divided by the acres to come up with the $14.71 that it's putting on each field. So let's jump ahead. Let's say maybe I got a bill for some maintenance on that combine. Maybe I got a bill for some parts that I use both on that combine as well as on that grain truck. So I'm just going to go to the account register. We're going to do this as a check. So I'll go in and say, let's pick our Traction checking account. And let's add a new payment. I'm just going to say the hardware store for some place to buy from. I bought some parts. My tax return, I'm just going to show this on my repairs expense account. My description, I'll just say parts for combine and grain truck. I'm going to say those parts for $10,000. And the allocation area now, I'm going to go in and say that allocation now is going to equipment. And I'm going to pick out, if I scroll down, I'm going to pick out both that combine and the grain truck. And these all relate to my 2026 crop year. And I can say maybe 7,000 of those were for the combine and 3,000 were for the grain truck. So it's allowing me to start putting those costs to those pieces of equipment that they relate to. Just going to go ahead and say apply and save and close. I'll show you a bit what we've done now. So let's go back and look at that field profit center statement again. So that field profit center, before, when I looked at that combine, the cost I think was $14 an acre. Our cost has now gone up to $21 an acre because I've allocated more cost to it. Again, the place where I can go in and see those costs, if I go to my equipment area, go to my 2025 combine, click on it. That 2158 is coming from my ownership cost of $15,000 plus that 7,000. So it's 22,000 total actual cost divided by the acres. So a couple shortcuts as you get into this equipment cost details. I mean, as you get a bunch of field records and a bunch of cost, this is going to kind of mix things in together. So a lot of times you may get in and just want to see a list. What are all my operating costs on a piece of equipment? What are all the repairs and other things like that? Up here is a quick filter for finding those. If I just want to see the operating cost, mine's pretty simple. I've only done that one, but that'll filter that list down to just the equipment or just the operating cost. And just like you can anywhere else, if something doesn't look right, if I need to fix something, I can actually go back to the purchase. I can adjust things. I can see details, things like that. Same is true if I only wanted to see
Scott,
the harvest field records. I can filter for that. And I think there was a question there.
yes. Brian,
Okay,
you talking. On the register, can you go back to that real quick? We entered in the record of it.
I
Yeah.
sure can.
Is there a spot right there that shows you, without clicking into it, that it's been allocated? Like you got the status where it says, puts an R for reconcile?
We don't today, Brian, and I know we've had some other people ask for that, either something here or a report or something like that to do it. So we don't today, but that is a good suggestion. It is definitely something on our roadmap to look at for the future.
Yeah,
So
because you can't tell what's been allocated until you go click on that go look back and look back at it, like the status of the reconcile. If you put it right there, like a A or something next to it, that you know it's been allocated or something like that. That's the hard
no, that makes complete sense.
part. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
And I
thanks for
think
that. Yeah, thanks for that question, Brian. I had another question through the chat, Scott. I think this goes back to your equipment setup when you're setting up the default and ownership cost. Do you set a per acre or per hour rate for depreciation? Or maybe you want to touch on that a little more.
we don't really do it that way. Ours is more that you're going to put in your ownership cost, which is kind of depreciation. We're going to figure that per acre per hour based off your actual hours for it. So the only place we would do a default cost is this default cost could kind of be your depreciation plus your operating cost with it is on a per acre per hour basis. I see a question, what if a repair is a promotional pay later situation? I think you're probably talking about a bill. So if I'm not writing the check for it today, if it's a bill that I'm going to pay later on, you can do the exact thing. We'll just go ahead and put one in. Let's say I got a bill today. I'm not going to have to pay this bill until later. I'll pick out who it's to and go to add items. And there's an option here for other. And do the exact same thing, repairs expense. Put in my amount here and just go down and allocate it to equipment and can do the exact same thing here. So if I just put this to my combine, This one we'll just put to the combine only, say it's all for the combine. And that'll allow me to have it. I'm not writing a check, so this isn't going to add to my Schedule F. It's just putting that bill out there for when I'm going to pay it later.
Yeah, in the slide deck at the very beginning, I really didn't touch on the bill feature at all, but just for clarity here, so the bill feature is part of Plus or Pro. You can have either one of them and have that feature.
So a couple things to talk about is this equipment area. This summary screen has a lot of good information on it. So the summary screen is going to show me as I use my equipment and field records, the acres or the hours are going to accumulate. And what it's going to do is show my cost. As I add cost to it, it's going to accumulate. And what this will do is that it's always going to kind of show me that default cost, that cost I typed in. So that cost is typically like a university cost, a custom rate. And what it's going to do is just give me a calculation as of right now, what my cost per acre per hour is. So where this is kind of nice, I mean, this number will change every time I do a field record and I do more acres or hours, that number is going to go down. Every time I allocate costs, that's going to go up. But what this is designed for, the end of the year, it gives me a place to just kind of go through and look at and start comparing my actual cost per acre per hour to this default cost. And this is a way to kind of go in. I mean, this one's kind of extreme, it's bad data, but the end of the year, I can see, okay, man, this equipment is costing me a lot per hour per acre. Why is it so high? Well, if I click in, I can start drilling down and seeing why it's there. But even more than that, I can start looking at, if you've got traction for a few years, I can start seeing year to year what that cost is. So for getting started, it's probably not a lot of good information, but it's helping you that if you've got equipment that looks like the cost per acre is high, pretty high, I can look and see it was just a one-time thing that we had some extra maintenance this year. I can flick through prior years and see if it's consistently been high. Tell me maybe I need to think harder about how much that's costing me. The other one then on the reporting side of this Field Profit Center report, that Field Profit Center report, a lot of times, like if I've got a lot of maintenance, if I do all my maintenance in the winter time and I don't have as much during the year, this cost per acre per hour is probably going to be unrealistically high just because I haven't used it in as many field records. So if that number's high, or maybe I haven't really just kept really good records and traction for all the costing side and it's unrealistic, I can always switch this setting up above and say, no, let's redo that report based off the default cost. And if I do that, it's switching it over to those $10. That's only for my field record ones, but allows me to kind of see it on the default cost basis. So I'll take, I think, looking at questions, I see a question there. Where do you find repair costs for one individual piece of equipment over the years? Susan, that would be probably the best spot for that is when I drill down here. This, I can switch between years here. So like if I switch this for operating cost, I can see right now that's that 2015 Case four-wheel drive tractor, 17,822. There's the operating cost for 26. Once I've got that set, I can just switch the year right there and I can say, okay, so there it was in 25 with all the details. So that kind of lets you switch between years also. The question about, and I see one from Kristen about the Field Profit Center report, that switching between actual and default, that is correct. That if you've got plus, if you don't have pro, there's no switching between it. Default is the only thing it's going to show with the plus level. So good question there. Okay, so I think the next thing I'll kind of go to is that this equipment area, the equipment that's not used in field records, is a pretty powerful thing that you can do with here. So what I see, that can be used for things other than equipment. I'll kind of show you an example of what I would see. A lot of people will go in and say, okay, I've got a lot of miscellaneous cost, and those costs I would like to have go to my fields. But I don't want to show. I'm going to have things like fencing supplies out there. I could have just general insurance. I could have some different interest expense, a lot of miscellaneous. And when I look at my field profit center report, I don't want to see all those individual expenses. I'd like to have all those just lumped together. So what I can do is I can add a new piece of equipment, and I'm just going to call this equipment overhead. This is equipment I'm not going to use in field records. I'm just going to leave it evenly split by field. This isn't a real piece of equipment, so I don't want to say it's owned. This is just a way of tracking cost and combining those costs and allocating them to the fields. So the way that overhead works is if I get a bill, let's say I get a bill for, just going to add a payment in there actually. We'll say I got a bill for insurance. I'm just going to pick my insurance there, put in the amount of the bill, and that allocation, I'm not going to allocate it to the fields. I don't want to see it as a separate expense on the fields. I'm going to allocate it to, just type in overhead, apply it, and say save. And maybe I also got a bill, wrote a check to buy some fencing supplies. So we'll say I went to the hardware store, the fencing supplies. I'm just going to throw off the repairs expense. We'll say it's $500. And again, I'm going to allocate it to my overhead and put it off to that overhead. And what that'll start doing now is if I go look again at that field profit center report, now I've got, instead of having repairs expense farm and having general insurance and all that there, it's just taking those costs and it's splitting it between all my fields. Now, it's up to you. I've seen some people that really like to see all those expenses listed on the field profit center. If you like having those on there, you absolutely can allocate directly to the field. This is kind of a nice way to kind of get it. So if you want to kind of combine things in there. Things to say in that overhead, I'll see people do different things. If maybe you've got one crop that gets a lot more of the overhead, that you want to allocate certain cost to overhead for a crop, you can have multiple overheads. You could have an overhead corn, an overhead beans, and an overhead everything. Some things to say on this, the overhead side, especially if you're just getting started with traction, this may not be the most important thing to you. Everything's really designed with traction, so you can kind of start basic and add things later on. So your first year with traction, if you don't do overhead and next year you decide to, you can always add those back.
Had another question here, Scott. Appears that somebody has connected a John Deere Operations Center, and when you do that, it has the ability to bring over your equipment names automatically into traction. So I think what's happened in John Deere Ops, those names might be the serial number name of the machine, and they want to change that name in traction. Is that possible here?
Absolutely, yes. So you can go in here and just take, mine are all normal names, but if you want to change those, you can just go to View Details and do Edit and just edit the name here. So we will still remember the linking. We're not going to change that name back in John Deere Operations Center for you. We'll remember the linking. The background, we're going to know what that is, but this name, you can change it to however you want to see it in traction. Yeah, I just see a good suggestion. Somebody pointed out using one overhead. That's a great idea. Yeah. So, like alphabetically, if you want to make sure that overhead shows up at the top of the list, just put a one before it or a zero before it. That'll put it at the top of the list. The other one, just be aware in here, a lot of people miss this, but we try to use the search button a lot of places. So, that's the other kind of quick way to get it. So, good suggestion, Michael. Yeah, I see a question from Chase, 14 days. I'm not sure what that one is.
I suspect he was saying that he's just 14 days using traction, maybe.
Okay.
I think it's part of it's kind of broken into two comments in the chat, I believe. Unless, Chase, you want to unmute yourself, and if we're not answering that question, let us know.
Well, again, what I would say when you're first getting started in here, some of these probably aren't going to be, probably getting the equipment used in field records would be my highest priority. And then other equipment that you really want to get cost to would be my next priority. Overhead, I guess, if it's really important for you to track it, you probably want to get it up front. But if you're not that detailed your first year, you don't have to be there. Okay, Brian, I think, am I missing any questions there?
No, I think we hit them all. But yes, let us know if there's something that we missed on our end, if there's a question out there that somehow we missed. But I think we touched on all of them. Feel free to keep typing away here in the chat. We just had one more slide in our deck here, and then we'll close out the webinar today. So we're working on a list of future webinars. Scott and I were actually just talking about that this morning. So be looking for some new ones popping in on our website. So if you're at the marketing website, tractionact.com, the footer area is where you can find a list of upcoming events. So be looking at that from time to time. We try to send out emails as well as reminders, and appreciate you all joining. This is being recorded as well, so we'll share the recording to everyone at the end of the day today. Other than that, we have a couple of webinars on Thursday. Those touch on our integrations with FS and Keystone. So if you have one of those cooperatives that you do business with, I think those are really great webinars to learn a little bit about what we're doing there with a bill integration. Other than that, you can go ahead and just type away as well if you want to use the chat and give us some ideas of future webinars. We are always looking to build upon that. And it looks like, Scott, we might have one more question.
I saw that. Good question, Susan. So kind of talk about that. It will, so if I go look at a few details.
Yeah, the question is, when you apply overhead, does it go to all fields or just the ones with current crops?
It is only going to go to fields that have crops for the year, for that crop year. So if there's any fields that don't have crop, they're not going to get any share of that cost. So if you had fields that were fallow and if you wanted overhead to go to them, there is a fallow crop that you can assign to it. Fallow does get treated just like a crop. So it would get allocated to those if you did it that way. So good question.
I'm not seeing anything else here, so I will assume that I think everyone is finished for today. Yeah, appreciate everyone for popping on again and joining us today. We enjoy doing these, and we look forward to seeing you at some future webinars. Thanks, everyone.